In the early Middle Ages, a war band sat on the edge of violence, waiting for a fight that could break them by morning. Drink moved through the camp because it always did. Ale and rough wine meant calories, warmth, and a familiar routine when everything else felt uncertain. Men drank to pass time and to prove they belonged. No one needed a reason beyond that. As the hours narrowed, talk changed. A few boasted that drink chased fear away, that it made a man hard and unstoppable. But it stayed at the level of swagger, not instruction. Veterans still checked straps, counted weapons, watched the ground and the sky. They knew trembling hands could lose a shield grip, and they also knew a dulled mind missed signals. Courage already had a job to do. So, alcohol hovered in an awkward space. It offered comfort, and it offered a story men liked to tell about themselves. Yet nobody treated it like a plan. Fear still sat in the body, and the coming clash still demanded attention, not fog. On that eve of battle, drinking happened, but the idea of drinking on purpose to feel invincible stayed a rumor that sounded better than it worked. Over time, the drinking stopped being just something the men did while they waited. It started coming from the top. Before a clash, a leader gave a clear order that ale or wine should be brought out, not later, but now, while fear still sat in the stomach. The point was simple: steady the hands, quiet the doubts, and make sure everyone faced the same danger in the same state. That order changed the meaning of the cup. It was no longer a private comfort or a bit of bravado between friends. It became a small ceremony with a purpose, a controlled moment set in time meant to pull scattered men into one mood. Drink worked fast, and that speed mattered. It softened the edge of panic and replaced it with a shared confidence the leader could count on. And it sent a signal that went beyond the alcohol itself. If the leader told them to drink, then the fear was expected, and it had an answer. Men who might have hidden their nerves now followed the same action as everyone else, which reduced shame and hesitation. Casual drinking turned into a pre-battle ritual, one last measure meant to bind the group and push them forward together. The next time they tried it, the promise met reality. The drink went out as planned, and men who had trembled the day before now looked steady. When the moment came, part of the line surged forward, hard and fast. They closed distance without hesitating, as if the fear had been switched off. For a few minutes, it worked exactly the way the ritual claimed it would. But the same drink that loosened fear also loosened control. Some fighters started too early, outrunning the men beside them. Others misjudged footing and spacing, and the neat shape of the group began to warp. Simple tasks took longer. Keeping rank, reading signals, stopping when told. A few swung wildly, strong but imprecise. The charge looked brave, yet it landed unevenly, and gaps opened where there should have been weight. Afterward, the results refused to settle into one lesson. Those who broke through credited the ale, calling it the reason they dared to press in close. Others pointed at the stumbles and scattered timing and saw the same cause. The camp started to split into two ideas: that drunken courage forced action, or that it stole discipline at the worst possible moment. One practice now carried two stories, and neither one fully won. Then another force stepped in, and it did not carry a sword. As communities became more tightly tied to churches, priests and local moral leaders judged behavior long before any fighting began. Pre-battle drinking stopped looking like simple nerve steadying and started looking like a public failing. It was named as sin, linked to loss of self-control, and blamed for the kind of disorder that threatened everyone, not just the drinker. That judgment changed incentives. A man who drank heavily before a clash now risked more than clumsy feet. He risked shame, gossip, and spiritual warning. Sermons treated drunkenness as a doorway to other wrongs, and leaders heard that message too. When a force gathered, drink could still appear, but it carried a new charge. The same cup that promised courage could also mark someone as reckless, undisciplined, and morally suspect. Rules followed the preaching. Some commanders tightened camp expectations because church pressure matched their own need for order. The point was not kindness, but control. A drunken line broke easily, and a panicked retreat killed men who never met the enemy blade. So the moral argument became a practical one. Sobriety meant steadier ranks, fewer accidents, and fewer excuses after failure. Pre-battle drinking no longer felt like a private choice. It became a test watched by the whole community. By the high Middle Ages, armies no longer looked like small bands that lived off whatever they found. Larger hosts moved with wagons, clerks, and planned supplies. That changed drinking. Ale and wine still mattered, but now they became numbers on a list. If a commander could count bread and arrows, he could also count barrels. Drink stopped being just a mood and started being a resource. With planning came control. Officers began to separate a measured portion from a free-for-all. A small issue of drink kept spirits up, dulled nerves, and made tired men feel looked after. But too much created obvious problems before the first blow landed. Lines wavered, orders got missed, weapons got dropped. The same liquid that promised courage also threatened basic coordination. So, commanders treated alcohol like a tool with a limit. They rationed it by time and by need, not by bravado. A controlled measure could steady a march and hold a unit together at the edge of fear. Excess became something to prevent, not encourage, because it wasted supplies and turned discipline into noise. The idea of drunken invincibility survived, but it faced rules. Then a different stage for courage appeared. Tournaments spread, and with them came a new kind of prestige contest. Trained fighters measured themselves under rules, in front of peers, with reputations on the line. The men who dominated these events started setting the tone for what bravery meant. Courage, they insisted, did not come from blur or buzz. It came from control. That message grew into chivalric culture, where an elite warrior was judged as much by discipline as by violence. A knight who kept his seat, held formation, and followed signals looked brave in a way a staggering brawler never could. Sobriety became part of honor, not because alcohol vanished, but because the best warriors wanted their skill to speak for them. The old claim of feeling invincible when drunk did not disappear. It slid downward. It fitted better with the rough edge of the army. Younger men, poorer troops, hangers-on, anyone who lacked training and reached for a shortcut against fear. At the top, the new ideal hardened. Real valor meant steady hands and a clear head, even when death waited. By the late Middle Ages, the drinking still happened, and some chroniclers admitted it plainly. Before a battle, men took strong wine or ale in large amounts, sometimes because it sat closest at hand, sometimes because fear demanded something immediate. Then the lines met, and things went wrong fast. A formation broke. A sudden charge landed where it should not have. The result looked senseless from a distance. That senselessness needed an explanation, and this time the explanation served a purpose. Writers did not just report drunkenness, they shaped it. If their own side rushed forward in a reckless surge, the story became drunken bravery, a kind of wild heroism that ignored danger. If the enemy collapsed or panicked, the story became enemy drunkenness, a shameful weakness that made defeat seem inevitable. Ink turned confusion into a message. So the cup stopped being only a detail of camp life and became a tool in the argument about what had happened. A hard-fought victory looked nobler if it came from fearless men, even if the fearlessness came from drink. A shocking loss looked less like poor leadership if it could be blamed on intoxication in the ranks. Chroniclers leaned on that claim because it tied chaos to character and character to blame. By the late Middle Ages, armies changed shape. More men fought for pay, under contract, for longer campaigns. Captains relied less on personal bonds and more on routine, marching orders, watches, fixed formations. In that world, drink stopped looking like a simple boost of courage. It started looking like a problem to manage. A man who stumbled, shouted, or picked a fight threatened the whole unit. That change showed up in writing. Ordinances began listing drunkenness beside theft and desertion, not as a private vice, but as a military fault. Punishments followed: fines, loss of pay, time in irons, even public humiliation meant to warn the rest. The goal was not moral purity, it was control. Officers needed men who heard signals, held ranks, and obeyed quickly, even when afraid. Once discipline became the priority, the old idea of pre-battle drinking as a useful tool lost ground. Alcohol still appeared on campaign, but it belonged to rations and supervised moments, not a free-for-all before contact. A drunk soldier no longer sounded like a fearless hero. He looked like a gap in the line waiting to happen. Cohesion mattered more than bravado, and cohesion demanded sobriety. Centuries later, the messy medieval record got cleaned up for modern ears. A few vivid lines from chronicles and a handful of notorious incidents started doing the work of 1,000 ordinary days. What had once looked like scattered situational drinking now sounded like a rule. The idea became simple, repeatable, and dramatic. Soldiers drank, fear vanished, and they felt invincible. That version travelled fast because it fit in one sentence. Then storytellers pushed it further. Popular histories, novels, and films needed clear motives and quick explanations, so drink turned into a shortcut for bravery. If a charge looked reckless, alcohol explained it. If a defeat looked senseless, alcohol explained that too. Nuance disappeared. Differences between a controlled measure and outright drunkenness blurred into one image. Men swigging before battle as if it had been standard procedure everywhere all the time. The internet sealed the transformation. Quotes got pulled from context, retold as facts, and paired with bold claims that sounded ancient and certain. Lists and memes treated a complicated past like a single habit shared by all medieval armies. The more it got repeated, the more it felt proven. A rumor turned into a rule, and by the time it reached most people, the question barely survived. Did they do it, or did the story need them to? Today, historians separated two things that old stories often blurred together. A small, controlled drink sometimes raised mood and lowered social tension, especially before danger. But intoxication did not create real skill or real strength. Modern researchers treated fear as a normal human response, not a shameful flaw. In that light, the early camp's bold claims sounded different. They looked less like a proven method and more like a way to talk themselves forward. Military psychologists measured what alcohol did under stress. It dulled anxiety for a moment, but it also narrowed attention and slowed reaction time. Judgment weakened first. The body followed. Balance, timing, and clear decision-making dropped exactly when a fighter needed them most. People also misread their own ability and took bigger risks, not because they became braver, but because they became worse at weighing danger. That gap between confidence and performance carried a cost. Modern understanding put bravery in a different place. Courage came from training, trust in the group, and leaders who controlled chaos, not from getting blurred and loud. A measured ration fit morale and routine, but drunkenness damaged coordination and broke cohesion. So the old idea of drinking to feel invincible turned into a warning sign. It showed how fear pushed men toward easy shortcuts, and how the shortcut often made the fight harder, not easier.